Hello and welcome. This is Tim Poe with UNC Cancer Network, and I'm here to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn, our Community Lunch and Learn lecture on cancer on January 27th, 2017. So glad to have you here. If you're attending the live lecture, and if you're watching this as a recorded lecture, we appreciate you taking the time to watch this after the fact. Just a few preliminaries, and then we'll get started. If you need to have any assistance and you're able to hear me, but maybe there's a problem with the picture or the slides, something else, you can go ahead and email us at unccn@unc.edu. You can also call or text us at 919-445-1000, and both a phone and in a call mode or a text mode will work with that number. We'll be using Poll Everywhere in a moment, and I'll explain that, but there's the number for that. You can find us on the web at unccn.org, and there you'll find all of our upcoming events, links to our past events, a lecture library of over, I think at this point, 160, maybe 170 different videos from different past lectures. You can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Facebook, and please, if you do something today, related to this, maybe you can take the time to find us on Facebook at facebook.com/UNCCN and like us or follow us. We would really appreciate that. You can do the same on Twitter at UNC_CN. All right, with that in mind, let's take a look at our poll. What you're going to do to join the poll is just you're going to text to the number 22333, the letters UNCCN. You only need to do that once today. After you've done that, you can respond to our first poll, and then you're also able to respond to the second poll, the question and answer poll at the end. We'll also unmute so that you can go ahead and share your questions verbally at the end as well. So the question is, what thoughts come to mind when you think of clinical trials? So this is kind of a brainstorm. This is, what do you think about? Maybe the word placebo comes to mind. Maybe there are certain concerns you have. Maybe there are certain rewards that you think of or opportunities that you think of around clinical trials. Just a few words or phrases. What comes to mind when you think about clinical trials? If you'll go ahead and share that with us, that'll help us to get the conversation going. Thank you. Kim Keller, welcome. Thank you. So glad to have you here today.
Thanks for asking me.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell our audience a little bit about you, and then we'll do an icebreaker or two and get started.
Sounds good.
So you have a Master's of Science in Nursing.
Yes.
You're an oncology certified nurse.
Correct.
And you also have an RN, a registered nursing degree. Excellent.
Right.
Excellent. And Kim Keller is the Assistant Director of Clinical and Network Operations in the Clinical Protocol Office, and I'm guessing you just refer to that as CPO. CPO at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And the CPO is responsible for patient and study coordination related activities, including registration, toxicity assessment, safety monitoring of new therapeutics, and patient education. So, lot under that CPO title.
That's right.
So, what got you interested in nursing and then oncology nursing and then finally this subject of clinical trials?
So I've been a nurse for almost 31 years.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot remember ever not wanting to be a nurse. So I've kind of had a path most of my life, and this is where I ended up. I was fortunate as a student nurse to do a clinical rotation on an oncology floor. So my first introduction to cancer patients was actually as a student.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with it and never looked back.
That's great.
And then about 11 and a half years ago, I applied to a position posted on the UNC Lineberger website. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into, and just found my niche. Just love it. It's great. I love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and I love that we are able to help progress cancer care.
Good. And certainly if anyone who follows the Lineberger site knows that there's a lot of very exciting work going on.
It really is. We're making huge headway, and I think we're seeing a lot of success and a lot more approved drugs in a shorter amount of time. So it's been really exciting.
Good. Well, we'll take a look at our poll and then get started. Again, we're so glad to have you here today.
Great.
Let's see if we've got any responses. None yet. If you haven't already, take just a moment, go ahead and you can text UNCCN to the number 22333 and then just share a word, a phrase, anything that comes to mind. I know some placebo, and am I going to be part of the real trial or am I going to be part of the placebo is one that I certainly think of.
Right.
Side effects, risks. Here's one, newest options available.
That's right.
So that opportunity, the really positive side of as a participant in a clinical trial, you're getting access to things that other people may not have access to.
Exactly.
Treatment options, great. Anything else that you want to share with us in terms of thoughts? Kind of brainstorm on what you think of when it comes to clinical trials.
I will say that those are nice and positive thoughts. Sometimes I've heard, a more negative connotation, so that's great to see that there are positive things coming across. And we'll talk about those in my presentation today.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn this over to our expert.
Okay.
During the rest of the lecture, if you have questions as they occur to you, you can go ahead and text those to this, and we'll go ahead and they'll just start to pile up, and then we'll see those at the end of the lecture, and Kim can address those. All right. So let me turn this over to you.
Great.
And the mouse as well.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today to talk to you about clinical trials. As Tim said, please send your questions. We will look at those at the end. I really wish this was more interactive so that we could do a real conversation back and forth. But send me your thoughts. And if you've actually participated in a clinical trial, that would be really great to hear, too. I'd love to hear what your experience was. Hopefully it was positive. All right, let's go ahead and get started. What I really want to talk today about is I want to be able to demystify clinical trials, help you understand what they are, and hopefully start to make you think a little bit about them as a treatment option. I think somebody said treatment option on the question. So that's really what the goal is to help you understand if your doctor comes to you and says, I'd like you to consider it, that you're comfortable doing that. I wanted to share some of the importance about clinical trials. I want to talk to you about why you should feel safe doing this. And then at the end, talk about some of the things that we have actually worked on that are now FDA-approved drugs, as well as leave you with some websites that you can go to and do some more investigating on your own. All right, I'm going to start out with just some facts. These are the things, this came right from the NCI website, the National Cancer Institute, and they really do encourage people to go out and share the information. They have a lot of information that you can upload yourself and print, and they want people to do that. So please feel free to go out there and look around. This past year, they were expecting about 1.6 million people to be newly diagnosed with cancer. 595,000 people were expected to die from their disease. For children, they didn't have anything as recent as 2016, but they did have 2014 information. And they're looking at about 15,780 children were expected to be diagnosed, with almost 2,000 children dying from their cancer. The number of cancer survivors, I am happy to say, as depressing as all those other numbers sound, is going up. 2014, they were expecting 14.5 million people to be cancer survivors, and just 7 years from now, that's expected to go up to 19 million. So we're certainly seeing a lot of positive trends right now, and I really hope to see and expect that to continue. The unfortunate thing is that cancer is something that will impact most of us in some way, either personally, someone in our family, a friend, someone that we know. Almost 40% of adults at some time in their life will be diagnosed with cancer. If you think about the number of people that are diagnosed every year and how many people are actually living with cancer, it's nice to see that there is a decline in the death rate. So cancer is becoming more of a chronic illness than it is something acute that you only have a short time to live. In both adults and children, you'll see that children, their cancer deaths have decreased 2% per year. I did list here the top cancers for adults, 2009 to 2013, and then I separated them out for men and women for last year, what they were expected to be. This is the data that was current in the NCI website at this time. And I think as predicted, prostate and breast would be the top in men and women, but then interestingly, they share the lung and the colon, so that's the same. When you think about how many patients are living with cancer, only 3 to 5% actually participate in clinical trials, which is why I'm so happy to be able to come out and talk to you about this, because I think for a lot of people it's just understanding what this means and taking some of the mystery out of it. When we're looking at clinical trials, it takes a lot of clinical trials to really move forward, because when you look at this, only 1 in 5 cancer studies will actually not get enough participants in to be able to be evaluable. So they end up shutting down the study. And most drugs, it takes 10 or 15 years to get drugs to market. So this is a really long and involved and careful and methodical process. And if you do participate in a trial, you will see how much detail and information is collected from you as you are engaged in the trial. And then healthcare cost is just continuing to escalate. Nationally, $125 billion in 2010, and that's expected to go up to $156 billion by 2020. That has a lot of cost. And just one drug treatment for a few cycles is hundreds of thousands of dollars for our patients. So the more we can find in towards not just treatment, but prevention and early detection, those kind of trials will become more and more important. This is a study that was done in 2006, and I think it's still very relevant. This group looked at 23 oncology studies and was really looking at the barriers to participation. What was it and why was it that patients were not really willing to participate? And I've listed the top 4 here. Just the fear of a reduced quality of life. They feel bad. Maybe they don't feel bad. Maybe their cancer, they're not feeling symptomatic at all, so why should I participate in a trial that might make me feel sick? They are worried about the side effects, as you mentioned, Tim, the placebo potential, and then just the concern that it might not be the best option. Maybe they should have stuck with their standard of care because the cancer drug study that's being studied isn't that beneficial and doesn't help them. And then the additional concerns, as you would expect. If you're going to be on a clinical trial, you can potentially leave your current doctor for a while and be followed by a new doctor, and for some that's pretty scary. And you don't get to necessarily have as much control over your treatment. The studies do require that you follow a certain regimen, a certain schedule, so there's a sense of loss of control. I was a research nurse for 7 years before I took over as a leadership role, and there were a lot of misconceptions that I learned about when I was meeting with patients, and I've got some of these listed here. The first one is just, if you're asking me to participate in a clinical trial, then there must really be no hope for me. I must just be at the end, and this is it. If I don't do this, this is it. I'm dying. And this is it. So just trying to get past that barrier. I want to hopefully do that today and make you feel more comfortable. And then help you understand that they're actually very safe, and you actually are followed a lot more closely on a clinical trial than you would be on clinical standard care of treatment. So it is really beneficial in the long run and not as dangerous as it might seem. So just to begin with a little bit of history about cancer and where we got started, cancer research really got started back in the early 1900s. The National Cancer Institute Care Act was actually written by President Roosevelt in 1937, and this was really the start of something that really just blossomed and ballooned from there. This is when he actually directed the Surgeon General at the time to begin to really promote the collaboration of clinical trials. So no matter who was doing the clinical trial, it was important that they share results and maybe try and foster faster success within cancer research trials. And then in 1944, the National Cancer Institute, which became part of the NIH. And again, this was important because now we had a much more of a recognition. There were earlier, trials have been around, clinical trials have been around for a while, research, but the early efforts for chemotherapy really started in the 1940s. And the first chemotherapy that was introduced was, of all things, nitrogen mustard. Back in World War I, nitrogen mustard gas was used during the war. And what was discovered by a couple of pharmacologists that were actually brought in to do, hopefully try and find a cure or a treatment for that exposure, they found that the cells, the white cells of these folks that were exposed were actually decreased. And they already knew that cancer cells grow really rapidly, and they know that white blood cells do as well. So they started beginning to think that maybe there was a way to impact the cancer by using this nitrogen mustard gas. When they started actually trying to study this, they realized that it just wasn't safe to have the gas in the lab, and so they altered it a little bit, the structure, to make it safe, and this is how nitrogen mustard came about. And then nitrogen mustard became a treatment for some kinds of lymphomas. So that was the first kind of official chemotherapy treatment back in the 1940s. In 1950, there was the first published information talking about the link between smoking and lung cancer. As early as the 1930s, they had research out there that was starting to really look at and see that there was a link, but the first actual published information came out in the 50s. And then in 1971 is when President Nixon kind of declared the war on cancer. This is when we really started to make progress. He signed the National Cancer Act, and that really intensified all of the efforts that were being coordinated across the country. So this was really a big step in moving forward. So, we asked the question about what do you think of when you think of clinical trials? Clinical trials is just, simply put, a research study that involves humans. For cancer, we look at this as more than just treatment. This is prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and it's also symptom management for cancer. There are two kinds of trials. There are interventional and observational. And interventional is what you would expect a traditional treatment to be. You're getting a medication for your cancer, and we're evaluating the effects and how well it does to treat your cancer. Observational is we're not looking at the drug. We're looking at something different. For example, we take a group of women with breast cancer, and the one group is exercising and one group isn't exercising, and maybe we compare how they tolerate their chemotherapy treatments and their regimens. So we're really looking at something more than just the treatment. So that would be more like an observational study. And then clinical trials are divided into phases, and it's a progression. And I'll be going over those in just a couple of minutes. The other thing that happened when I was doing research and consenting patients, every once in a while I'd come across someone that would actually use the word guinea pig when I talked to them. They were like, I don't know, this sounds kind of like you're really just wanting to use me as a guinea pig. And it was a little surprising the first time I heard it, because I had really never considered that before. But I heard it enough that I really want to kind of stress the point that we really don't consider patients that are enrolled in studies and that are willing to help us with this as guinea pigs. The participation is completely voluntary. Even when you consent, you are told that you can withdraw at any time, and that's actually in the paperwork that you sign. So that gives you a hope, some peace of mind that your doctor is asking you to do this because he or she feels like there's the potential for benefit, and that you are comfortable knowing that if you get started and things don't feel right to you, you can always pull out. I also want to assure you that there are some guidelines and federal regulations and guidelines that protect you as patients on a clinical trial, and I've listed a couple of them here. And these are both nationally and internationally accepted standards on how to treat people that are engaged in research. So again, we want to make sure that patients that are participating are safe, that they don't feel like they're a guinea pig, that they feel like and know that they have rights, and that the information that we're collecting we're going to actually use that and do something with it, and that the data is credible. So this is, I hope that these kinds of things will help you to understand that this is really intended to be above board, ethical, and you are fully engaged, and all information is shared with you while you're on the trial. Before we open a clinical trial, there are steps that we have to take to even begin to prove that and ensure that the trial is ethical. So again, it's looking at when a patient is asked to be on a trial, I want everyone to understand that this trial has been reviewed before we ever even opened it and started to enroll, so that we make sure that it's safe, that your rights are protected, that you're not being taken advantage of. At UNC, on all of our clinical trials that are treatment trials, we actually have them reviewed by a protocol review committee that's made up of a scientific panel of people that review the study to make sure that they think it's okay and that it's based on solid scientific rationale for why we would want to put this into a human. Any study funded by the government does require this, but like I said, at UNC, we do this for all of our treatment trials. We also have something called the Data Safety and Monitoring Board, and this is a group of folks that actually look at our trials ongoing. So while we're doing a trial that could be open for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years or longer, they review the data on the trial periodically to make sure that we're following the steps that we said we were going to follow to make sure that everybody stays safe, that we consent people the right way, that the information is collected the right way, that we bring you in and we assess you for safety at the intervals that we said we would. So there's lots of things to make sure that we continue to follow the rules. And if they have any concerns, they can actually put a hold on the study and say you can't put another patient on the study until you make us feel like it's safe to proceed. So again, it's really about the safety of the folks that we're bringing on the studies, and hopefully you will feel that from the moment you are consented. The other thing that we have, and a lot of our sites that open clinical trials have, is an institutional review board. They also review the study before we open it to make sure that it's safe to proceed, and they look at risk. Are the risks minimal? Is it compared to the benefits of the study? They review our consents to make sure that we are fully disclosing everything to you as a patient when you sign the consent. We have to renew our study every year, and we have to report back to them anything that's been overlooked or anything that we might have missed. Maybe you're getting a blood draw and they forgot to check one of your electrolytes. We have to report that to the IRB. So they make sure that we continue to follow things that we said we we're going to do to keep you safe. So I've mentioned the consent a couple of times, and I just want to kind of go into that a little bit more in detail. Anytime you're going to talk to somebody about a clinical trial, we like to share the consent with you. It's a written document. It could be something that's 10 pages or 12 pages, but it could also be 35 or 40. And so for that reason, we try to discourage people from signing it the first time they see it. It's really a great idea if you get a consent and you're going to be looking at a clinical trial, that you have the opportunity to take the study, the sample consent home with you, that you're able to review it, able to look it over, write down questions, get your questions answered, share it with your family that might have to help you get back and forth to your treatments, or share it with your local doctor to make sure that you and he feel that this is the next best thing for you and this is the right thing to do. Then when you come back into the hospital, you will be asked to sign a consent before we do anything that is related to your study, whether it's draw a blood sample, do an EKG, whatever it might be. There's nothing that can be done that's related to your study until you sign this giving us permission to do so. And again, any time you want to withdraw, you just have to tell the person that you're working with, and we will stop. This is a continuous process. It's never ending. If there are changes in the risk, let's say that we tell you that it's very rare for someone to have vomiting with this drug, and suddenly we see that there's a lot more patients having that problem, then we might have to modify the consent and then talk to you about this change in side effect to say, well, we thought it was only happening 10% of the time, but we're seeing 75% of the patients experience this. And the whole point is that you're well informed, and you can then decide if you want to stay on the study and continue. But it's important that you understand, again, the risk versus the benefit. So you are going to be informed every step of the way. The consent will talk to you about the purpose and goals of the study. When I go into the details a little bit about the different phases, a phase 1 study, it's got different goals than a phase 3 trial. Are we looking at trying to identify the drug level that's safe? Or are we really looking at comparing this drug to what's already considered the best care for this kind of cancer? So we want to make sure that you understand the goals of the study and that you're fully informed of that from the beginning. We want you to understand what your alternatives are. If you're not comfortable with the study, or you don't want to do this study, what are your other options? What other treatments do you have? You have the right to say, I don't want to do this. So what else can we do to help you treat your cancer? And that's a conversation that you would have with your doctor. Eligibility. We want to make sure that you understand that not everybody can be on the trial. You have to meet certain criteria based on the goals of the study, based on the side effects that the drug might have. So it's really important that you understand all of that before you go on. We're also going to talk to you about the schedule of visits. Maybe it's not feasible for you to come into the clinic every week, or for you to spend the first 3 days of every treatment at the hospital, or a month in the inpatient unit. So we want to make sure that all of that is covered in detail, again, so that you understand before you sign the paperwork. We also talk about how long to expect that you're going to be in the study. Is this something that you're going to get for 6 months and then we're done? Or is this going to be something that's ongoing? Or maybe after the treatment is done, we still call you every 3 months to see how you're doing. So we'll tell you about that as well. And then again, talk to you about the benefits and the risks, the side effects that we expect, and to the best of our ability, we'll tell you how frequently, or what's the expected potential for you to experience a side effect. Is this something that's really common, or is this something that's really rare? There are 4 phases to clinical trials, and here at UNC we do the first 3. And I will go into these in detail, but phase 1 is really just, usually it's a first-in-human drug. It can also be a drug where we've had maybe 2 drugs that are both approved by the FDA, but maybe this is the first time that they're being combined, and that would be potentially a phase 1 as well, because we're really looking at the safety of the drug. Phase 2, we're starting to look at the efficacy. How well does the drug work? In phase 3, we're going to be comparing that new drug to what's already out there. And then phase 4, which we really don't get into, is post-marketing. So this is after the drug is FDA approved. There's sometimes ongoing studies, and so that would be a phase 4. Phase 1, as I mentioned, is a first-in-human. It's really looking at the safety of the drug and maybe even the maximum tolerated dose of a drug. These kinds of trials enroll really small numbers of folks because we really we do it very slowly. We call it a 3-by-3 design, which basically means that we will not usually enroll more than 3 patients into a dose level, and we follow them for the entire cycle of the drug, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, sometimes it's 6 weeks, and we don't enroll another patient until you finish that first cycle and we know it's okay, that you're safe, that your side effects were easily controlled or were minimal. And then if we need to, we would then bump up and enroll 3 more patients in the next drug level. If, for example, those first 3 patients, somebody is really sick, we may bring in 3 more patients and ask them to consent to the same dose level to see if that was the person that was just really sensitive to the drug, or versus was it the drug that made you really sick, because we do not want to escalate this to a higher drug level if we already have determined that maybe this isn't the best dose. So that's really what a phase 1 is about. It's identifying the dose of the drug. The other thing that phase 1s allow us to do are really to look at what we call pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So basically, what does your body do with the drug? How does it break it down? How long does it stay in your system? And then what does the drug do to the body? How does it affect it? You may be asked to spend 8 or 10 hours in an infusion area with an IV in your arm, and they draw blood samples off of that, and then they send that off to the lab, and they're looking at the drug level. Sometimes they do additional testing. Maybe while you're there, they'll want to do EKGs. I had a study one time that the drug, after we gave the drug, well, before and then after, we took like a little biopsy of the skin, and we were looking at how fast the cells were replicating to see what the effects of the drug were on the body. So those are different things that get collected in this first phase of a trial, as well as what kind of side effects are we seeing. In phase 2, we're really looking now at, we've usually identified the drug dose, and we want to confirm it, and we're also looking at how well does the drug work, what kinds of cancer gets benefit from this drug. We will continue to monitor side effects, because maybe side effects that we didn't see in phase 1 are now coming to light, and there are things that we need to worry about, or that maybe it's not something to worry about. We just have to be able to control it. Still small numbers of patients, usually still under 100. Where we might have 2 or 3 sites in a phase 1 trial that are participating, this will expand out to a few more. It's still small numbers, because we still want to be able to be very careful and methodical at how we look at the results, review the results, and how we proceed, and really make sure that we have all of the information we need before we go on. So it's still a small study. So in phase 3, this is where we get into some of the placebos that Tim mentioned. We're again still looking at how the drug affects you, what kind, is it effective, what kind of side effects are you having. But we might want to compare, we're ready to now compare this drug to the best standard of care drug that's out there for your kind of cancer. And so we often will have to do what we call randomized trials. And you will know this when you're consented if this is truly the case. If you're going to be randomized, you're going to know it. It's not going to be a secret. And we're going to tell you what the odds are of getting the study drug versus what are the odds of getting the standard of care drug. So basically, sometimes our trials are a 1-to-1. So 50% of our patients will get a study drug, 50% will get the standard of care. Sometimes it's a 2-to-1. So we might say to you, you've got a 2 out of 3 chance of getting the study drug. And so we will tell you that up front. The randomization is not done by us. It is usually done by a computer, so that it is completely unbiased, and we have no control or say in what group you go to. The picture over there on the slide is just to try and show you how that is done. So it kind of mixes you up and then puts you into one of the groups. And then you would be told what group it is. When we consent you to this kind of a trial, we tell you that here's the visit schedule for all of the groups, because sometimes the schedules are different and the number of trips you have to make in can vary depending on which arm you get enrolled to. This is also where we get into some of our placebo studies, which is a really scary thing for both the patient, we know that, and it's also for us, because we really want you to be able to get the best care, the best opportunity to be treated. And so because of that, it's often that we don't even know if you're getting the drug. They'll often be blinded, and what that means is that the patients don't know, and neither do the providers, your doctor, us, know what drug, if you're getting the drug or if you're not. Usually these kinds of studies happen when there's not a true standard of care drug approved for your cancer. Once in a while we see placebos on other trials, but usually they only do this mostly when we don't have a standard of care option to compare your study drug to. And these are really large studies. We could have thousands and thousands of people involved, and it can be international. So this is something that could be involved worldwide. And this is the point where we start to really look at an FDA approval for the drug. This is the last step before the drug company takes this to the FDA for review and potential approval. And then phase 4, which here at Lineberger we do not participate in, but these are the post-marketing studies that really look at long-term effects. Even your over-the-counter medicines will often have a phone number to call if you're experiencing a problem, and they collect that information and they watch for trends. Back in 2011, this became a really big deal because we had a drug called bevacizumab being used to treat breast cancer, and some patients really did get benefit. But there were 2 trials after the FDA approval was received that really showed that this drug had very little effect on breast cancer. Not to say that nobody was getting benefit, but it was small numbers compared to what would be standard of care. And so it would be unethical to leave that out there as an FDA-approved drug that you could treat breast cancer for if the majority of patients were not going to get any benefit. So that was actually withdrawn. FDA approval was withdrawn from this drug in 2011. So what's in it for you? What are your benefits as a patient to come and participate in a clinical trial? In a phase 1 or phase 2 trial, we don't have a lot of information. We may not even be able to tell you that there's been any benefit to date. But we will be upfront with you and tell you that early on that we don't know. But you also have the opportunity to be one of the first that gets a new drug that actually does provide benefit. I can think of a melanoma drug that is now approved that when I enrolled my first patient on this study, it was a first in human. No one had ever received this drug. He received 1 dose. He had melanoma, and it had gone to his brain. And he had some side effects that made him uncomfortable, and so he ended up withdrawing from the study. He only received 1 dose. I still can't believe it when I say it, but 5 years passed, and he was in complete remission. The last I knew, he was still alive and cancer-free. It's been at least, I think, 6 years now. So, there is that. That's unusual, but it does happen. In later trials, we actually can tell you that there's better benefit, and we can know that maybe you'll get the benefit. And the nice thing about a phase 3 trial is even if you are in a trial that's going to be randomized, you're going to get either the current FDA-approved treatment, or you're going to get a drug that's about to be potentially FDA-approved because it has shown benefit to patients. So we're really, at that point, it really does feel like either way, I think it's a win-win. Some patients come into these studies and they can come in and they'll say to me, well, I don't know what it's going to do for me, but as long as it helps somebody else. And so some patients actually, for altruistic reasons, do consent to a trial. Their feeling is that if it doesn't help me, maybe it'll help someone else in my family or another person with cancer. They don't want them to have to go through it. So for some, it's a very personal choice, and even if they don't come in completely optimistic, they want to give it a go. And the other thing is you're really followed much more closely on a trial. You've got your doctors, your nurses, your navigators, but on a trial, you have a study coordinator to call and talk to when you have symptoms. And if they can't help you, they're going to direct you. They're going to call your doctor. They're going to help you take care of whatever the need is or get the question answered. So it really is something to consider. I will say that in our consents, we do tell folks that there's no guarantee that you're going to have benefit, but that it's meant to help future generations. So we kind of tell you that up front. But then when you think about it, if we're moving this into human subjects, somewhere along the way we've seen benefit. And so hopefully your doctor feels like there's opportunity there, or he or she wouldn't be asking you to consider it. And as I mentioned, there's no guarantee. There are risks. In early phase trials, we don't know if it's going to help. If it's a first in human, we really don't know. And we don't necessarily know all of the side effects. So there could be things that happen, side effects that you experience that we really weren't expecting. And so that's something that you have to kind of be willing to potentially experience. Any symptoms that you have, though, you're going to be in direct contact with your doctor and your study coordinator. The other downside is health insurance doesn't always cover all of the costs associated with a trial. And I'll be going into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute, but it's going to be important that you understand what costs are covered and what aren't. The inconvenience is definitely a factor. If you're on a phase 1 trial, you could be here for days, coming back and forth every day for blood draws. You could have to spend overnight stays in the hospital, 8 or 10-hour days in the clinic, letting them draw blood samples. So there is an inconvenience to it, but hopefully in the end that you'll get the benefit associated with that. There's also the extra cost. If you're coming back and forth, do you have to worry about childcare? Do you have to worry about gas? Do you have to worry about someone driving you back and forth because the drug makes you feel bad? So those are all things that you have to think about before you consent to the trial. If you're interested in clinical trials, you have some different ways to actually find something that might help you. Talk to your doctor first. Your cancer doctor knows you best. They know your condition. They know how well you're doing right now. And it might not be that this is the right time for you. If your doctor does feel like that this is an opportunity, or you want to look around and see what's local nearby that's a trial that's open that you want to talk to your doctor about, I've listed a clinicaltrials.gov website here, which is really a great way to find a trial. I highlighted 2 sections on this, one that says search for studies, and then the one right under that. You can actually search by location. If you type in colon cancer and Raleigh, then you're going to get a list of studies that are close by. And then on the list, it will actually tell you the details of the study, the eligibility criteria. So you can look at, do I meet the eligibility criteria of the study before you even call. And then there is contact information. So you can actually call directly to a study coordinator and talk to that person about the study to see if this is something you want to pursue, and then share that information with your doctor. As I mentioned, there are eligibility criteria to help keep you safe. We want to make sure that you're not harmed. We don't want our trials to make you sicker than the cancer that you have is making you. So we want to make sure that this is the right thing and that you're strong enough to be in a clinical trial. Believe it or not, you've got to be in relatively good shape. You can't be really sick and feeling where you can't get out of bed most of the day. Those trials can make you sicker, and we don't always know the side effects. So we need to make sure that you're able to tolerate the side effects. The studies also want to know that the data that the experienced side effects that you're having are related to the drug and not because you're not feeling well on most days. So again, they really do want relatively healthy individuals to go on a clinical trial, but all of the requirements, right down to your blood counts, sometimes how high your blood pressure is, what does your EKG look like, all of that is part of the eligibility for a lot of our studies, and all of that would be discussed with you, and that's what would really help to decide if it's safe for you to proceed. All right. I mentioned cost. This is so important. Often the consents will say that they're pretty vague. They'll say that the study is, the sponsor will cover anything that's study related, but what does that mean? And that's really difficult to know and understand. So I really encourage you to make sure that you are clear on what your responsibilities are before you start. There are usually 2 kinds of costs and charges. Some of them are considered routine, and that means that this is normal care that you would receive no matter what, if you were on a clinical trial or not. So your doctor visit. If you're going to typically come in every 3 weeks to see your doctor, have labs, maybe you get a CAT scan every 6 or 9 weeks, that's routine care. So those are probably going to be charged to your insurance company or to you. So be clear on what those costs are. And then the research costs are the things that would normally you wouldn't have done. So let's say instead of coming in every 3 weeks, which is routine, your doctor needs to see you every week for 6 weeks in a row because of to check the safety and how you're doing and talk to you about side effects, maybe draw extra blood samples. Those are not routine care visits. And so in that case, we would actually tell you that those are charged to research. Now, your coordinators can help you to understand the costs and what's charged and what isn't. If you have any concerns about whether your insurance company will cover it, it's going to be important that you speak with them and talk directly to your company or speak to a financial counselor if you need to at your facility, just to make sure before you go on and sign the paperwork. I've listed here just what federal law requires your insurance company to cover, but again, it's really vague, and so it's really hard to necessarily understand, and on a case-by-case basis, it's going to be really important that you get clarification. And if you have a case manager that's assigned to you as part of your healthcare system, then I would encourage you with your insurance company to talk to them. If you're in a government program like Medicare or TRICARE, they have different rules. So again, please talk to them. Medicare will usually cover anything on a clinical trial that is routine care or costs due to medical complications associated with participation in a clinical trial. So if you're getting a study drug that is not FDA approved and it's provided by the sponsor, it's considered a research cost and you get to have the drug given to you for free, so you're not charged for the drug. But if it's an IV drug and you're going to spend 6 hours in an infusion chair, often those charges for the infusion, not the drug, but the infusion, will be billed to your insurance company, or Medicare will cover them. Again, something that's really important for you to understand and check before you get in too deep into the trial. TRICARE is a little bit different. They will cover NCI-sponsored trials, and they are someone you would definitely want to talk to. They're a little bit more rigid in their what they will cover. So up front, I know for us, when I've had a TRICARE patient in the past, I've made sure that I have spoken to someone directly through TRICARE that can help make sure that it's covered. And then the same for any veterans. Again, if it's an NCI-sponsored trial and it's at the Veterans Administration medical centers, those are covered. Just kind of in wrapping up, I want to share with you, I talked about the progress we've made, and I just wanted to share, I've been at Lineberger since 2005 in clinical trials research, and really when I came into it, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it's been really fascinating, fun to really watch and see how many great drugs have come through and the progress we've made in such a short time. It's just really exciting to see patients getting benefit from drugs that weren't available to them in the past. And so I've listed some of the drugs that I have seen get FDA approval since I've been here. This is not an inclusive list, but just some of them that maybe as a patient you yourself have seen, or as a provider you've seen and prescribed or seen your patients receiving. Melanoma just had a huge run of drugs approved since 2011. They've been on a roll, but I think we've seen success in all areas. There's some more there. And like I said, this is not inclusive, but it just shows you some of the strides we've made. If you are more interested in clinical trials, clinicaltrials.gov, as I mentioned, is a great place for both providers, healthcare workers, as well as patients. Patients, you can find clinical trials, and there's a section where it asks you, are you a provider or a patient? So you can look up information based on your role. Cancer.gov will give you a lot of information. If you're looking specifically at local stuff, our unclineberger.org, you can actually click on patient care and then click on find a clinical trial, and you can find something local. And then cancer.net, which actually publishes current cancer information as it's discussed and reviewed at a lot of the local conferences like the American Society of Clinical Oncology. That's it for me. I will say if you guys have questions about specific clinical trials, if you're interested as a patient in finding one, both our main number is on the very first page with where my name is at the bottom as a way to reach us, a local and a toll-free number, so that you have call us directly. We're open when we're open during our office hours. There's a human at the other end that answers the phone, and if you say I need to talk to someone about a GI trial or a breast cancer trial, they're going to direct you to the right person so that you can start talking to somebody about a treatment option. So that's available to you if you're interested.
Kim, this is great. I know that I've heard a really good lecture when I, as a non-clinician, have a big list of questions.
Good.
And I definitely do. I want to encourage all of you to go ahead and submit your questions. Let me bump to that Poll Everywhere slide. So just to remind you, if you haven't done it yet, text the letters UNCCN to the number 22333. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and join our Poll Everywhere poll. We've already got UNCCN. All right, somebody had just texted that in, and then something about newest options available. Mm-hmm. That may have been a follow-up from earlier on. Let's see, anything else I need to tell you before I jump in? Well, what I will tell you is that I'm lucky because I get to keep talking to Kim after the camera turns off, so I want to encourage you to get your questions in now. I'll go ahead and ask one or two of my own. And Max is going to unmute as well, and if you have a question, if you'll unmute, and that way you can just go ahead and jump in and ask those questions. We do ask that if you're not asking questions and you're unmuted, that you remain very quiet in your room because we will hear the audio from your room. All right, so we'll start. Any questions that you'd like to just go ahead and share?
She knows the tree, knows the prequel to the kids, the tree. Cool. They enjoy it.
All right. Well, I'll jump in with one of mine. I know you talked about some of the observational types of trials. And I wonder, do we ever see a benefit where, let's say, somebody's doing a study where there's a
like
walking,
to
and they're
know
being
about that,
monitored on
yeah.
their walking? Is it possible that they may actually receive a benefit just because they're participating in a trial, and they say, hey, I want to do well in this trial, so I'm going to make sure I get in all my
Yeah.
steps or physical activity. And I want to, I'm sorry, I want to stop for just a second. We've got one of our sites that's talking. I want to remind you, if you're unmuted, if you can be really quiet in the room if you're not asking a question so everyone can hear. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned with that breast cancer trial,
Mhm.
where you're kind of putting people into different groups of exercise and not, there is benefit because usually you have a coordinator that's going to be calling you and checking on things.
Mhm.
And I think that it's almost like a coach, you know, it's someone that can keep you motivated and moving forward. And especially if you're experiencing benefit, it's enough to keep you wanting to do it.
Great, great. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a
Yeah.
positive side
Absolutely.
benefit from that. Questions from our audience? Anything you'd like to just speak up and share? I'll jump in with another one. So what happens, you sign up for a trial, it all sounds good, you've read all the fine print, and then it just gets to be too much. And you say, you know what, I just don't think I can do this anymore. I think I need to quit the trial. What are the ramifications? Because I'm sure that, potentially that could keep somebody from even signing up if they thought, I don't know if I can make it all the way through that. So what does happen if somebody gets to that point?
So we have, when we consent a patient,
Mhm.
we go through in detail
Mhm.
the potential side effects, the visit schedule, and everything. And when a patient starts on a trial, even after we've done all of the eligibility, maybe they've already received their first treatment, and suddenly they're like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. They can withdraw. They reach out to their study coordinator, or they talk to their doctor, and they tell us that, and that's it.
Mhm.
We put them back in touch with either the doctor here, if that's their doctor, or we reach back out to their local oncologist,
Okay.
and they resume care with them.
Okay.
So there is, it's not intended to be a form of punishment. It doesn't affect their relationship with the doctors here. If they were already seeing that doctor and now they're in a trial of theirs and they feel like withdrawing, it's perfectly okay. It's a very personal choice.
Mhm.
And for some, it's just not the right thing.
Yep.
And so it's okay.
Yeah, well, that's good to understand that you can sign up for a trial with the best of intentions,
Yep.
and then just find it ultimately
Overwhelming.
is
Yep.
more than one can handle. Questions, additional questions, and you can text those in or just tell us now. Well, we'll come back to you two more times and give you a little more time to do that. I'm guessing that not all trials go as anticipated. And I know that sometimes you hear about a trial being fast-tracked or alternatively a trial ending prematurely. What might happen that would cause a trial to either be fast-tracked and jump onto the next phase or to be terminated?
If we have a trial where the drug is really, if we're in a randomized study and we are seeing a really remarkable difference between the study drug and the standard of care drug, and the study drug is doing so much better, and that information is recognized, we can often, the company will fast track a drug through the FDA, especially if there's not a lot of options for that kind of disease. So the FDA will do a kind of bump it to the head of the line, and they do a faster review. When an FDA drug is approved, one thing the FDA does is they come to the sites.
Mhm.
They want to make sure that the information that the company told them about the drug is true.
Right.
So they often come out to our sites to make sure that we were in compliance. Why did all those? Did you really have that many patients that got their disease shrunk, their tumor shrunk, or that they benefited from it, or that they really did respond so well that you can't find their tumor anymore? And so the FDA will pick sites, and you never know ahead of time whether it's going to be you. And they come out and they will look at the site and all of our charts and review all of our information, all of our data, and make sure that everything we reported was valid. On the flip side, if you have a study that we're seeing patients get really sick, maybe there's a death. And if we are unsure yet, was it related to the drug or related to the disease, we will, often they'll put the study on hold to evaluate. And sometimes the study doesn't get reopened. Or if it does, Maybe there's another person that suffers a really bad incident. Maybe they don't have to die. They're just really sick. They're hospitalized. Maybe there's a lot of complications. It starts to send off red flags, and it can actually shut down a trial. So that's why we're very careful, especially in early phase trials, to be very methodical and collect the information, because it might not be safe to proceed.
Right.
And I think the numbers around 10% of phase 1 studies go forward. So it's a small number to begin with, and that's why, because we want to make sure it's safe.
Right, and I think that level of scrutiny hopefully lends confidence to this entire process, knowing something could be fast-tracked or ended early.
Right.
We've got just another minute or two left. Any other questions that you'd like to share? Make sure you're unmuted if you want to go ahead and ask Kim something now.
Well, if you've been on a clinical trial and you want to share an experience, we'd love to hear that too. It's always great to hear what others are thinking about their experiences.
All right. If there are no other questions, I want to share just a couple of other things. Our next Community Lunch and Learn lecture is February 24th, and that's Stress Management for Everyday Living. And that's with Kelly Kivett and Kelly Morale, and they'll be here with us at noon on the 24th. We really hope you'll join us for that lecture. We also hope that you'll visit our site at unccn.org and take a look at some of our past lectures, see all of our upcoming lectures, follow us on Facebook, and ask any questions that you may have. I bumped out of one. I wanted to look at one more slide there. We want to thank the state of North Carolina for their generous support of the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center and the University Cancer Research Fund for making all of this possible. And I would like to personally acknowledge Mary King, Max Gaynor, and Alan Brown of our team who work very diligently to bring these lectures to you. So thank you to all of them as well. We look forward to seeing you soon. Kim, thank you again.
Tim.
Really appreciate your being here. To our audience, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.